Welcome to Nonpartisan Hacks, where we talk about good government from the local level on up. I'm Joel Grenz, councillor in the city of Parksville.
And I'm Sean Wood, also a Parksville councillor. Just a quick reminder before we dive in, the opinions you hear in this podcast are our own. They don't represent Parksville Council or any other body we're part of.
We don't just have one guest today, we actually have three guests. They are the three candidates running to be the next leader of the BC Green Party.
After Sonia Furstenau stepped down following last election, the Greens launched a leadership contest. The membership deadline has passed, and voting will take place online from September 13th to the 23rd.
So joining us today, we've got Dr. Jonathan Kerr, a family doctor and Comox counselor, Emily Lowan, climate justice advocate and researcher, and Adam Bremner-Akins, political science student, organizer, and current party secretary.
We're so glad you're all here. Thank you so much to all three of you for making time for us. Really appreciate it. And let's get started.
And I just realized, did I actually pronounce people's names right?
You got Akins.
Oh, and sorry, what? Yeah, Akins, right?
Akins, yeah.
My bad. I apologize. I was like, as I'm reading this, I'm like, I should double check this pronunciation. I was at an event the other day where someone put me down as Joel Gomez. So
it's close.
Yeah, I mean, it's close.
It's close to Grenz.
Yeah. I did a quick little brief intro, but what I'd love to hear is you guys introduce yourselves. So why don't we maybe start off with Emily, who's coming into us. She's the only one who's not live on Sean's deck today. Our studio today, I guess we forgot to mention, is Sean's deck today instead of my deck. And Emily is live from where today?
I'm here in Victoria on Wasanich and Lekwungen territories.
Great.
And regrettably not on your deck.
Yeah, which also means it means you miss out on the bread.
Yeah, it's I'm a bit heartbroken about that, but I'll get over it.
What else should we know about you?
So I have a decade of experience as a climate organizer and policy researcher. I've won campaigns on divestment and housing, and I've led broad coalitions across climate, labor, and Indigenous nations. Most recently at Climate Action Network Canada, I've led coalitions on the federal oil and gas emissions cap, against LNG expansion, liquefied natural gas expansion in BC. I've worked as a media spokesperson and have worked with nations on the front lines of pipeline fights, as well as working at the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. So I'm so excited to be back to the BC Greens. I really started my journey as a climate advocate and organizer with the BC Greens when I was just a teenager. So they were that open door. They were that bold voice on climate that brought me in. But ultimately, I left because I didn't feel represented as a young and working class person. And so now that I have this decade of movement building experience and coalition experience across so much of civil society, I'm excited to bring that expertise and those networks to the BC Greens and really build a party with fire that represents young, working people, renters, and Indigenous communities across the province.
Yeah, sounds like a great opportunity with this leadership race to think about what the party stands for moving forward, and I think we'll get into that some more. So thanks very much. How about Adam? What else should we know about you?
Yeah, thank you. I think the big one is that I've been around the party for a long time. I served on the party's provincial council for 4 and a bit years. I was a councillor at large, and as you mentioned, the secretary. I'm the only person actually to have run for the BC Greens before, twice. Once in 2020, once in 2024, over in the Lower Mainland, and I've been working with the party for, probably about 7 or 8 years now. A lot of it at the grassroots level, but a lot of it as well within leadership positions within the party. And that's where my experience comes from. And that's I'm looking to push the party, continue on what we have done, but grow our seats. And that's growing into the mainland and growing on the island and expanding our seat count so that Greens get to a position where we always have leverage in government. And that's my core belief moving forward. And that we need to address issues like climate change and cost of living. As someone who lives in BC and who is not wealthy, it's hard. Housing costs, rent costs, grocery costs, insurance costs, whatever it is. Frankly, it's pushed me to the point where I feel that I need to come up and step up for myself and, not just my generation, but every generation, and say that the province is headed in a direction that isn't sustainable, both in an environmental sense and in a well-being sense. And that's why I've decided to run for leadership, because I am steadfast in ensuring that this province is somewhere that I'll be able to live for the next 60 years.
Excellent answers there, Adam. And let's pass it over to Jonathan. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, Sean, Joel, thanks so much for having me. It's so nice to be here. Beautiful morning. I'm Jonathan Kerr. I'm a family doctor. I've been a family doc for the last 17 years up there in Comox, a little north of you. And I've been on Comox Council, and I've had the pleasure of seeing you two at UBCM and AVICC and all the other, conferences that we've been attending with the other mayors and councillors across BC. I ran as a Green in Comox, and I got elected. And, representing my community as a Green city councillor is something that I am very proud of. I ran for re-election, got elected with the highest number of votes in my town. And now I'm vice chair of our regional district, working on things like you're working on: water, sewer, recreation, all of the important things that matter to people in their lives. In terms of my Green Party involvement, I've worked on about 12, 13 campaigns, municipal, federal, provincial, over the last few years, last 10 years or so. Really working on things like communications, strategy, campaign manager. I've kind of done all of the different roles, get out the vote, and really getting that experience on the ground, running the grassroots of a strong campaign. And I'm a biathlon coach, so I coach cross-country skiing and rifle marksmanship with youth and adults. I've got 2 kids myself, 15 and a 17-year-old, couple of teenagers, so focused also about their future and what's ahead. So yeah, I'm just really excited about running for this position. I'd like to lead the BC Greens into the next election with a broad coalition right across the demographics so that we have a really successful chance in the next election.
Yeah, we've got a room full of, or deck full of people who are running or have run for office before. And I don't know about you, Sean, but when I was thinking about running, it's always the question of what's the moment that we're in right now? How does my background or interests or my own lifestyle, actually, like where I'm in my own life, fit in with this moment and running now? Any thoughts from you folks on why now? Why? What's the moment like now that means that this is the time for me, Adam, Emily, Jonathan to run for this role?
Yeah, these do not feel like normal times, and I'm a young person, and I think feeling the compounded crises of our time, really at being in sort of the front seat and front view of these unfolding crises between climate, affordability, toxic drugs, housing in this province. We've had the same government for 8 years, and I've witnessed every major problem get worse. And I think it was a lightning rod moment for me when Trump was elected for the second time, and seeing how our governments used Trump as a Trojan horse to reverse progress on climate, on Indigenous rights, and so many other issues, and how they're, really taking away the wrong lesson from the last election. We narrowly escaped a far-right government in the last election, and the BC NDP are just moving further and further, trying to chase those conservative voters. But what they're missing is a real wealth redistribution agenda that unites working class people across this province. So that felt like a gaping vacuum to me, and a critical role for the Greens to play. And so I was just really remarking that, the Greens have so much potential, but dwindling membership. And that's what the role I see myself playing as an organizer, and I'm running on results in this campaign. And over the last month, we've seen membership increase by thousands. I cannot share the final number just yet, unfortunately.
We want some breaking news here. What's the number?
I wish I could say
it's in
a process. But
it's just us here.
So the membership list did start at 5,500 and is now over 10,000. And we've seen amongst youth under 30, it started at about 150, 180, and is now just under 2,000. So that's 1,000% increase in youth membership. And then we've seen, I think, about 3,700 additional memberships, including some renewals of people who have stepped away from the party for years and are now coming back with renewed excitement about this leadership race. So I'm really excited to see how my following has really taken off. But that's some in-camera details.
Well, it's interesting to see. I mean, leadership races are such a critical time for parties to rethink, but also to bring a whole new generation and cohort of membership to the party. And so exciting to see if parties are taking this opportunity, and the Green Party is taking the opportunity to grow the membership. So meet Jonathan.
Yeah, well, and if I can just say on the membership list, I want to really congratulate Adam's campaign and team for all the members that you've signed up as well. I know our campaign has signed up, many, many people as well. And the party, the most probably membership signed up, the party staff who've been calling like religiously over the last few weeks to make sure that members, past members, lapsed members, donors that weren't members, and people that have been involved with the party in the past come back home. And that's a huge thing that we're seeing as well. In terms of meeting the moment, when I ran for council the first time, I did a listening campaign, and I went out and I knocked on 3,000 doors, stood in front of the grocery store with a sticker board asking people what issues mattered most to them. And at that time, it was healthcare. I need a family doctor. It was affordable housing and the environment. And, on housing, as vice chair of the regional district, I've been advocating for a housing authority, and we just brought that in this year, which is really exciting for us. We're going to be tackling more below market rental housing. I chair the task force that is bringing new family doctors. We've recruited 45 new family doctors and nurse practitioners in the last 3 years, with 11 more coming this year. And also, in terms of the environment, I've been working with local biologists, and we just stopped the bulldozing of a wetland that was up for development. So in my community, people see me as, he's the tree hugger, green guy on council, but he's also the guy that's working on housing and healthcare. And so what the moment for me is, we know environmental voters are going to be with us, right? And especially with what EB's been doing with Bill 14 and 15 and backtracking on climate regulations, we know a lot of environmentally focused voters are going to come back home to us. But we can't only rely on them. We also have to focus on people, which is the majority of British Columbians, whose top issues right now, as you and the three of us know on council, are affordability, healthcare, and housing. Those are the issues we have to win on. And having credibility in all of those in my community, being a family doctor, bringing the Housing Authority in as a regional director, those are things that I can speak to and go into a general election and lead on, and really make sure that we have the best chance in the next election to get as many votes from all walks of life of British Columbians.
Well, I mean, green's in the name, so I think people will probably get that part of the platform. So filling out the details for sure. Adam, how about you? What's the moment today in your life and the moment in the political scene right now?
Yeah, and I just want to thank as well to Jonathan and Emily and to the party for all the new members who signed up. And I know a lot of people as well who are coming back, and I think this is an exciting time for the organization itself. And in terms of why now, I think for me, the why now is more timing in my life. I've been very active within the Greens and within the climate movement for a very large chunk of my life. And these are issues that I've always cared about. It didn't take, Trump getting elected for me to start volunteering back in, I don't even know when now, standing outside my high school by myself with a sign that said, no TMX. It's always been in my being to advocate for the environment. I've worried about it since I think I watched the first documentary on climate change I don't even know how far back that would have been now. But
is that the Al Gore one we're talking about?
I don't know. It's one of the old ones they used to run in schools that, it was some, I can't even remember now. But it was one. And I remember thinking, holy crap, no one's doing anything about this. And ever since then, I've sort of been on a warpath after climate change. And as I grew, and especially through my time at SFU in political science department, the issues I have focused on have expanded as the province has, the quality of our lives within the provinces begin to deteriorate due to cost of living crises, housing crises, and healthcare, and so on. And so those issues folded into my passion on climate change, and they aligned very well with the BC Greens, because at the time I had joined originally for climate, and they all came together. And now I'm someone who can't afford to live where I grew up, and I can't afford I can't, if I needed a family doctor, and thankfully I have one now, but if I move to somewhere else in the province, for instance, I'm not going to be able to find one. And I worry about our forests and our landscapes and environments and our oceans and the dwindling orca population, and all of these issues have compounded me, and they've pushed me to be here. But I don't think there was a specific moment for me that was I need to do leadership now. I think it's always sort of been there. And this was just the first opportunity that I have after all the time I've spent within the party organizing and in its leadership positions. I was like, well, there are people who told me you should consider it, especially in the early days when we didn't have as many candidates out. And now I'm here.
The podcast we're on is Nonpartisan Hacks, and obviously Joel and I try to be as nonpartisan as possible. If I were a BC Green and I'm thinking about the leadership race, I look at the two seats held by Jeremy and Rob down there, previously Adam and Sonia, and I think the party would love to see more seats in the legislature. Should you win the leadership of the BC Greens, what strategy do you have to grow those seats down there, taking into consideration that there seems to be a bit of a movement away from environment, more to kind of cost of living, economy, housing, healthcare, as we've already touched on. What sort of messaging, or what do you see the leadership of the BC Greens doing to grow those two seats in the legislature? A CASA is great, and maybe there is one in the future, but obviously more seats is better, and I'm sure that's what the membership would like to see. So I wanted to throw that out there to the three of you. Oh,
and since we described what these acronyms mean, I think last time you did the paper candidate definition.
Sure.
What is the definition of CASA? Does it stand for something?
Confidence and Supply Agreement.
Thank you.
And currently it's CARGA, the Confidence and Responsible Government Agreement, which is
it got rebranded.
It got rebranded because it's an annual thing now.
Oh,
before it was a 4-year agreement, and now it's negotiated every year.
Wow. Oh wow!
Yeah.
So when's it up for renegotiation?
This fall. I mean, the next leader is going to have a huge role to sit across from the premier and the ministers and have that discussion about all of the issues.
What month would that be?
Probably October, November. In that range. Yeah.
Oh wow!
It's soon. It's soon. Yeah. And I think any of us going into this, we focus on issues of healthcare or cost of living, and these are the issues we're going in the direction of. I think the three of us being candidates, whoever wins, regardless of where we go, these are the issues on all of our minds. I think that's definitely a direction the party's moving in, regardless of which one of us wins.
So then how do you grow? What's the strategy? Is there a secret sauce for the BC Green Party to capture more seats in the next election? Let's hear the secret sauce.
I can tell you. Let me tell you my secret sauce.
Okay.
My campaign is audacious, and we're directly tackling corporate greed and corporate interests that are calling the shots in the premier's office. And I think that is the through line across all of the major issues of our time, from housing to resource extraction and climate, to affordability, to toxic drugs. I think it resonates deeply. And so my campaign is called Fight the Oligarchs, Fund Our Future. And it speaks to the growing number of British Columbians who are tired and frustrated with being second to corporate interests and who are just struggling to get by. And so I think realistically, that is how the Greens grow their vote share and increase their membership and their number of seats in the next election. Because the NDP have abandoned their progressive voters, and that includes people across labor, across, renters, workers, Indigenous communities. And I think the explosive growth of my campaign says that people are hungry for a clear message and something that is someone who's truly speaking truth to power with a bold message. And so, galvanizing all the disillusioned and disaffected people who are fed up with the status quo in this province, I think would give us incredible leverage. I've heard from several people in the NDP, staffers of former Minister of Finance, Carol James. The NDP isn't afraid of lobbyists and polite politicians or centrists. They're afraid of politicians and movements of people that have the capacity to galvanize real numbers. And I think the NDP needs a force on the left pole of the government to make them compete for the progressive voters again. And I think that would make our few seats more effective, but it also opens up a whole new playing field for us in the next election. And so we've seen my coalition really does have broad appeal, including world-renowned experts like Dr. Gabor Mate, Zipporah Berman, Severn Cullis-Suzuki, Grand Chief Stuart Phillip. These are people that have formerly been in the NDP, supported the party at a high level for a long time, and are now seeing my leadership in the Greens as a real possibility and as a winning strategy.
So secret sauce, I'm hearing is around the corporate interests and more for the people. I didn't summarize that very well, did I? But I'm going to pitch it now to other secret sauce ideas.
Well, just to respond to that, and with respect to Emily's comments, I mean, I think that's that sauce that isn't going to make a very good recipe. Being audacious and fighting.
I like going with this metaphor.
Well, being audacious and fighting, that doesn't scare the NDP at all. As an elected official with experience, I know that the NDP only, respond to power. And that's what we saw with CASA and Carga, which we defined before, is it's having the balance of power. It's having enough seats. That's what they care about. Just shouting into the wind about climate or housing or anything, that doesn't change the government at all. Look at Fairy Creek. Lots of people got arrested and protests. It was only when we had power in the legislature that we were able to make a change at Fairy Creek. Okay? Protesting alone doesn't change anything. It's protesting plus power. That's the strategy. So, I'm here to represent, coming to this leadership race with elected experience to bring a serious, responsible government and to govern with the balance of power in the next legislature. And to answer your question of how to do that, it's to win more seats. How many? More than 2. How many? To have the balance of power. And to do that, we always have the best candidates as Greens. We always have the best platform. It's an amazing platform talking about a green economy, green future, housing, healthcare, and all of those social issues. But it also, we need the ground game. And I know how to win as a Green, and I know how to make sure that we have the ground game across all of the ridings across this province to make sure that we have 4, 8, 12 seats after the next election so that we have the power so we can enact green policies. We can't just wish it. We have to have the power to do it.
Adam,
can I quick response, actually?
Sure.
So what I'm hearing here is from you, Jonathan, is that we need to be pragmatic, moderate, and grow the party by courting the center. And I don't think those numbers add up.
That's not what I said, actually.
I think it's what you said in Rob Shaw's article, so I'm just representing what's on the record. And I think any seasoned politician would tell you that the party in power owns the center. These are people who are comfortable with the status quo, and they're not looking for change. They're committed voters who are hard to turn. And I think we already tried that in the last election. We had good policy, but our communications and our political strategy came across as NDP light. We became redundant and we faded into the background. This is a critical moment and crossroads for our party where we can choose between energy and irrelevance.
I don't want to defend any of the candidates, but kind of my view, Emily, on government is that you kind of come in very idealistic, and then when you have power, say the BC NDP or maybe the federal Liberals, you quickly learn, say in Premier Eby's stance, he wrote a book previously on how to sue the police, but then after Lapu Lapu, he's standing in the legislature saying that previous to a court ruling that a guy should spend the rest of his expletive life in jail. And to me, that's very indicative of when you are in government, the idea of governing actually brings you to the center because you have to be a bit more moderate, and that's just what governing does, and that's where governance is. And I don't mean to be kind of preachy or defend anyone's points, but that's kind of my view, is when you do get to government, it makes you be a bit more centrist and moderate, which sounds boring, but I think that's what we see happen.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a trend that the BC Greens can break, and it's to our full advantage because we are a small party and we do have an outsized role to hold the balance of power while still being, I think, bold and unrelenting and to a degree uncompromising in our vision. And I think what my campaign has shown is that we can build real provincial profile, real ground game, and real energy with a bold approach. And I think that's what British Columbians are truly hungry for, and a role that the BC Greens can play, while having, smart policy and well-informed negotiations with the NDP. And we need people inside the party to help do that. But I think externally, we need a bold voice that is going to actually galvanize people, because frankly, the wind is out of our sails in this party. And there is no future for us if we cannot bring in new members with a galvanizing voice.
Awesome. And thank you for entertaining my own opinion there, Emily, as well. And let's pass it over to Adam.
Yeah, I have to say, I do disagree with the statement that the wind is out of our sails. As a movement, we are the largest internationally organized political movement on the planet. There are hundreds of Green parties across the world with the same core values that we have as the BC Green Party. And in that sense, climate and issues that are near and dear to Greens are on the rise. And I see my role as leader in growing the Greens is not one about fighting over centrists or progressives. It's about coalition building with partners both in government and out of government. It's about meeting with labor unions and issues groups and pulling people from all parties who want to be involved with our vision. It's frankly, it's telling the story of what the BC Greens see our society being and bringing people along for that ride. Because when I have been out door knocking as a Green MLA, one of the best things that works is when we tell people and are able to communicate it with them personally. The BC Greens want a world where you don't have to worry about the cost of living and you have a house and you have an environment that's going to be stable and sustainable for your next 7 generations. So your grandkids have a place to live in this province and they're not forced out like we're seeing now. And in that sense, I think that the next leader of the BC Greens really needs to focus on and opening up to all voters and not just specifically targeting one group of the spectrum. And if you look at even data on how Greens win elections, large chunks of our existing voter base are people who come out to solely vote Green. And that's because of the message and the vision we have as a party and getting more people. 50% of people don't vote. That's the group we need to be targeting. We don't need to be fighting each other over the NDP or the Liberals or the Conservatives or the federal Greens, their voter bases. That half the population doesn't vote. Those are our people. Those are the people Greens have historically turned out to win elections, and those are the people that I want to go after because they have apathy. And I understand in the world we live in, it's hard to engage with politics. But there where I see the party's growth in the future, and we need to connect with those people on a personal level, and that's going to be what I see myself doing until the next election or the next by-election is going around to communities across the province and communicating with these voters and saying, hey, look, we understand that you're frustrated. You don't want to vote. You haven't been turned out in the elections. Let me give you a reason. I have no interest and I'm sure our message will resonate with lots of NDP and Conservatives and Liberals and, across the political spectrum because our policies are based in evidence. They're not based in opinion. But that's what I see my role as is targeting voters who haven't come out yet or Green voters like we're seeing with the membership renewal, Green voters who are coming back to the party out of nowhere. And that's because they're those people who haven't been engaged recently because they have apathy towards our political system.
Yeah, one thing I would say on this sort of discussion around, centrist versus, being more activist is that we do live, and there's lots of talk about this, we live in an attention economy now, and for better or for worse, the person who gets the most attention is going to get a better shot at winning elections. We've seen this obviously south of the border. I don't know that it's made our politics better, but we're competing now against so many different ways of accessing information and videos and chatter, that cutting through with attention is so critical. So I guess that's kind of the one thing I would say on the whole. The whole argument about whether the policies should be government ready or whether you can get elected with government ready type policies. So, but a successful leader needs more than vision. They also need to work effectively with a team that's already in place, and there is already an infrastructure of sorts. I mean, not of sorts. There's the legislative staff in the legislature. There are 2 existing MLAs that have their own priorities and ideas, and so whoever wins this leadership race is going to be coming into a situation where they don't have a seat. I'm sure you're hearing this all the time. But there's also not just the fact that the leader won't have a seat, but there's an established sort of culture and workflow and priorities in the legislature right now, which is where the actual governing's happening. There will be the campaigning, which it might happen right away as soon as this leadership race is over. How do you address the fact that there's kind of this existing thing with an existing staff and existing MLAs? How do you work yourself into that team and make it stronger?
Yeah, I think it's an important question, especially because neither of our MLAs are running. Someone new is going to be coming in. And I think that's sort of one of the advantages I have going forward in this is I've spent a lot of time with the party staff over the last 5 years. And I've gotten to know some of them quite well. And I look forward to meeting more and as many as I can. But in terms of the organization and the way it is, it's an organization that I'm familiar with. And as you mentioned, we're in a transition period, and the party will change after this. But I think that, my experience speaks for myself. I've been in this organization. I understand how it works. I've been around the processes. I've hosted events like our election night event in Victoria, and that was a lot of work to be with staff and candidates and getting involved in media. And I've been in the rooms with people, with our staff and on our party people, and I've been there before. So it isn't going to be new for me. These are relationships that I have, or, I will have the ability to build stronger. And I look forward to the opportunity to do that. But yeah, for me, it's just walking into a room with a bunch of people I know, or people who know of me already.
Emily, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, totally. I think it's a huge advantage, actually, to be an unelected leader until the next election. I think, in some ways, Sonia, she got to make her debut as leader immediately after her election. And yeah, that had pros and cons. But I think in terms of election preparedness, it's incredible. We can have our fantastic MLAs hold down the fort at the legislature, and they have brilliant policy minds, and I can be in the field campaigning and preparing our organizational structures for the next election. Right now, we only have 6 functional riding associations and 6 others that are in progress. So I'm bringing in a groundswell of people, thousands, into the party that can build up those riding associations and ensure that we have the best candidates for the next election. Yeah, so I think it's about election preparedness and working with the team really cohesively. Like I got to know the caucus staff when I was working at my organization, Climate Action Network Canada, when we were talking about all sorts of climate and fossil fuel files on BC policy. And so, yeah, I think just to summarize, in order to win future elections and expand our leverage in the legislature, we need to build this party into a force that can fight corporate interests on behalf of working people in this province. And over the course of the campaign, we've seen over 1 million views on my Instagram alone. And yeah, incredible traction, over 60,000 in donations. And I think, yeah, as we continue to build support for our platform and grow membership, that it'll just have a snowball effect. We'll be able to recruit candidates in ridings from working class backgrounds and properly support them. And that's what we've seen in winning examples most recently in the US and in the UK. I mean, I think Zach Polanski in the UK is an incredible representation of what Green Party politics could be, as well as Zoran Mamdani in New York. So that's the kind of groundswell that I'm looking to build with my leadership.
Jonathan, you've got the added ingredient of being elected already, which is an advantage and a disadvantage, I guess, as regards the general question. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a huge advantage. I mean, when I look at what Rob Botterill and Jeremy Valeriat, our two current MLAs, were able to negotiate with Carga, the cooperation agreement, more community health centers, more protection for renters, a review of Clean BC, the Committee on Democratic Reform. I mean, these are amazing things. And it's just proof that when you elect Greens, we get things done. In my community, when you elect a Green, we get things done. Housing authority, more family doctors, environmental protections. And, I really think the wind is in our sails. This is my 21st stop here in Parksville on my cross-province tour. And whether I'm up north in Prince George, Quesnel, Williams Lake, the Kootenays, Nelson and Caslow, Kelowna, Kamloops, everywhere in between, I've really seen a lot of excitement for this leadership race and for the fact that we have Greens everywhere in this province. They want to vote Green. They're excited. They want to support candidates in their ridings, and they want to support candidates that have a really good chance of winning in ridings where there's a lot more Green support. So I really think that it's about getting out on the road like I have been doing. I love traveling this province, whether it's for biathlon races or for, as I've shown this campaign over the summer, and make sure that we connect with voters, whether it's a coffee shop in Prince George or a backyard barbecue in Caslow, and really make sure that we have that excitement and growth in our party. There's so many amazing people that are doing great work in their communities. We need to recruit them, whether they're councillors, mayors, doctors, other professionals in the community that can run for office, run for the Greens, that have that name recognition. And then we need to provide them with really strong campaign managers and campaign teams running into the next election. I know how to do that. I've run elections, I've run campaign teams, and I want to spread that message all across the province and make sure we have that organizational excellence and campaign readiness going into the next election.
Not too many doctors, though. We need doctors to...
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on the province subsidizing the energy transition, EVs, solar, clean tech? What role should the government play on subsidizing that? And I guess especially considering what we've seen maybe with Emily's favorite person, Elon Musk.
Yeah, I think there's an article, it was in the Financial Times the other day, that said capitalism won't meet the needs of the energy transition fast enough. We cannot scale our private markets to the degree that we need to build the amount of infrastructure that we need. And it laid out from a very conservative outlet that we need government intervention and we need government subsidies in order to meet the moment of the energy transition. So in my policy, we need to eliminate all the massive handouts and subsidies that we're giving to the oil and gas sector. For LNG Canada Phase 1 alone, we gave over $6 billion. That was a pretty sweet deal, frankly. And so we need to invest in small-scale distributed solar projects, at least 20 million annually. And we need things like a universal heat pump program and ensure that we are retrofitting all new buildings to use clean electricity for primary heating and cooling systems. And there's so much that can be done, and we have so much technology that's at our fingertips, that's ready and available at scale, but we need to see the investment.
Yeah, I would lean to agree. I believe government's role is to drive our society and to push us towards a better society. And in that role, we have seen advances on social justice causes, and we have seen new regulations and efforts to move towards a more sustainable society. But I think the government needs to step it up a notch. We're running out of time. Arguably, we've run out of time now to keep it at 1.5 degrees or to keep warming under 1.5 degrees. And at this time, subsidies, I waver on some things like EV subsidies. I don't particularly see the value in subsidizing cars, because that is just something we're going to have to begin to move away from as a society. We cannot, whether they're EVs on the road or gas powered cars on the road, the infrastructure is incredibly expensive, and there's no way that everyone can have an EV and still be sustainable. We don't have enough resources on the planet for that. What I will say is subsidizing things like electric bikes and scooters, it's way cheaper, and that will make a difference. It'll allow people to transition into a different lifestyle, and I think putting policies forward like that will drive a fundamental change in how people live their lives for the better, is the direction government should be pushing with subsidies. It's not throw all the money we have at this problem. It's we need to be intelligent about it. We need to pick and choose what we do, because the government doesn't have unlimited resources. We can't drive ourselves into hundreds of billions of dollars of debt doing this. But also, we have the ability to design a society where it is cheaper and healthier and happier to live. And I think that is what subsidies will play a role in this process. And that's what I would like to see the government move in that direction.
You know, what we see is that there's this triangle, right? There's the affordability crisis, the environmental crisis, and the economic crisis. I have a patient, he's in his 30s, and he lives in Comox but works in the oil fields in northern Alberta. And he flies out, leaves his wife, 2 kids, flies out every 2 weeks. Hates his job, right? He wants to be here. Last time I saw him in the office a couple months ago, he's like, Doc, I'd love to work in BC, but I put food on my table from working in the oil field. We need to create BC as a clean energy powerhouse. Our province could be a hopeful, exciting beacon of light where we convert from the oil and gas sector, transition over time to a clean energy powerhouse where my patient and many other people who live here and work elsewhere can live in BC and work in BC. I've released a whole platform on energy, and I'd love you to check it out if you're listening, jonathankerr4bc.com. Along with the other planks of my platform, this energy platform is really key on making sure that we transition our economy and transition how we use energy. We can have an abundance of clean energy. We will attract new industries. For every dollar spent, if you invest in the oil and gas sector and create one job, the same amount of money invested in clean tech or clean energy creates 3.4 jobs. We can have a stronger, better economy with higher paying jobs, more jobs, with a clean economy than one based on fossil fuels. That's the excitement that I'm trying to show British Columbians, and that's really resonating as I go across the province and talk about this.
One thing that really bugs me about the province is that we're broke. We have about a $10 billion deficit. And when the credit rating agencies lower our credit rating again, and it's probably not an if, then it gets more expensive to borrow. We're kind of looked at as a more risky investment. Are deficits bad? And if so, how would a leader of a BC Green Party get out of that deficit?
Yeah, I could be happy to. So I was reading the same thing. I think it's our projected deficits now is going to be $202 billion. And that's incredible. Not only for the fact that we have to pay that back. And I think people forget that is something we're going to have to do in the future, and that's going to hamper future provincial government budgets. But as well, it's going to get more expensive to borrow, and that's going to make it harder to do the things we need to do in BC. And to that, I think we have an opportunity as a party, and we've put forward policies that look at, taking a bit more from the people who have a lot, and ending the billions of dollars we give out to the fossil fuel industry, because we live in a capitalist market. Why are we giving companies billions of dollars to make money? That's, it's always been irrational to me. And I think targeting things like that and cleaning up the budget, cleaning up the provincial budget, and looking at ways we can also trim down without touching our essential services is going to be critical. We are going to have to find a way to be more efficient with the way we spend our money. And I think when we talk about that, people get scared. They're like, oh, you're going to cut programs and social services. Absolutely not. But unless you want to argue with me that we are funding them the most effective way we can now, let's sit down and look at if we can do it cheaper. We don't have to change everything, but why not explore those opportunities? There are going to be things within the provincial budget that we can chop down on. It's not like one individual in this province actually has a full comprehensive understanding of how the budget works and how the money is spent. That's just not true. And I think reviewing that, as well as cutting subsidies to things like oil and gas and increasing taxes on the highest earners and the highest earning companies and those who are extracting our resources to go sell them off somewhere else, that's definitely a direction we need to use, because we have companies profiting profusely off of our natural resources in this province, and they're not contributing at the levels they should be. When minerals leave BC, we don't grow more minerals. That's it that's it. We lose those minerals permanently. So why are we just giving them away?
You just have to wait a few million years, I think.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, enough asteroid dust falls back onto the planet, we'll get some. And I think, looking into that and asking ourselves do we really want to just keep selling out our province at that level, or do we want to put in some taxation policies that will allow us to really benefit from the resources we have? Because at the time, it seems we're going to continue to extract, and there are some resources we're going to need to continue to extract, and how we can do that sustainably and fairly and help that on the provincial budget is important. And I think it's just not an issue that's the government has even bothered to explore. But I think it's one that Greens have talked about. We talk a lot about fiscal responsibility as a party, and that's incredibly important because it's one of the things that defines us, but also this is taxpayer money. This is the money that we all work so hard to pay to the government. It isn't just numbers on a sheet. We really should be taking care of how we spend money in the province, and I think reviewing that is going to be effective.
Well, Joel, you and Sean, you guys know what it's like around tax time, right? We're setting tax rates for our town, Comox or Parksville. You know what that's like, right? People are out there with their signs and don't raise my taxes. We know as elected officials how that responsibility of keeping taxes low especially with the cost of living right now. In Comox, we're really proud. Our deficit's really, really low. We don't actually have much debt at all, and that's really exciting for us because we can keep taxes lower and raise them less than other communities. And I think the three of us will all agree, yes, we need to stop the oil and gas subsidies. Yes, we need to have a progressive tax system where wealthy corporations and individuals get taxed more, and that benefits others. But I think what we need to talk about is healthcare. Healthcare, if you look at pie charts, and I'm not the biggest fan of pie charts, but if you look at it, the wedge that is healthcare keeps growing and growing and growing every year because we're putting Band-Aids on bleeders, right? We have to stop doing that. If you look at the wait times in hospital, if you look at the admission rates or readmissions to hospital, it's because 20% of British Columbians do not have a family doctor. That number just came out in the primary care report last week. So by investing in primary care, prevention, finding disease early, making sure that we have everyone with a family doctor with timely access so they're not waiting in the emergency room. An emerge visit costs $800. An admission costs $18,000. These are exorbitant numbers. Every time you add a family doctor to a community, you save the healthcare system $1 million of unneeded tests, admissions, and ER visits. And diseases that are caught early and prevented from getting worse. So we need to address our healthcare system, and I'm really excited to tackle that going in, and that'll help our fiscal situation for the province.
Yeah. It's funny timing. I am just about to hit go on our healthcare policy and plan. So yeah, we can nerd out over that. You can find it on my website, emilyforbcgreens.ca. We had some incredible health experts and professionals review it, and yeah, we absolutely need long-term access to primary care doctors and team-based care in BC. So I have a lot about community health centers with wraparound holistic support. And yeah, there's a huge challenge in this province where we technically have enough doctors, but many doctors are working part-time or choose to leave public and primary care entirely, where BC families are left in the lurch. So we do really need to change the prevailing fee-for-service payment system because it doesn't incentivize primary care doctors to take on full caseloads and forces them to become small business owners. So yeah, there's so many budgetary things that we could address with the healthcare system, but what is core to my campaign is some of this narrative around provincial debt. We hear from the government all the time, they're broke. And they're saying that the only way we can afford schools and hospitals is if we subsidize a bunch of foreign billionaires to dig up and burn more fossil fuels. That is not true. And it's not the answer for British Columbians. So in my platform, I talk about implementing corporate and individual tax increases on BC's richest corporations and the 1%. And the plan is quite simple. We have examples like a windfall profits tax, which would apply to just about 35 of the richest corporations in BC on their profits over $1 billion. Many of them are making an average of $4 billion in annual revenue. And so it would increase the tax on those corporations from 12 to 18%. And that would actually bring in $4.1 billion in annual revenue. And we can see similar figures with increased taxes on luxury and vacant homes and many other ways that we can ensure that the richest in BC are paying their fair share. We do hear a lot about, capital flight and all these sort of fear-mongering, this fear-mongering from those individuals. But I think it's so important to remember that the rich aren't living in BC because it's some sort of tax haven. They're living here because it is an incredible place to live, and it's a center for economic trade in Canada. And companies can operate out of places where they can recruit and retain skilled workers. And we can ensure that BC is more affordable by providing more amenities that allow workers to build their lives in this province.
Thanks to all three of you for the answers on that one. Moving on to, in my mind, electricity generation is kind of an answer to move away from fossil fuels. I'm pretty sure the BC Greens were against the Site C dam, as were a lot of people who care about the environment. What do we see as we move forward for generating the electricity that we need in the province as we move towards a more electricity-generated future?
Adam, you want to go first?
I could go first. Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And opposition to the Site C dam, even John Horgan was up there with a no Site C dam sign. And I think that speaks to the nature of we don't want mega projects like that. And I think it's important to focus also is one of the main reasons they built the dam in the first place is to fund and fuel the LNG extraction in the north. And frankly, we didn't need that dam to be built if we weren't building those LNG terminals and the frac wells that are up there. And I mean, when we look at BC's electricity, we have been growing, but it's been a relatively flat line over the last 30, 40 years of electrical usage. As we've grown and things have got more efficient, we've adapted as a province. And that's not to say that we'll never need more electricity. But I think there's also advantages to exploring new solar and new smaller scale hydro projects that aren't going to, flood. I don't even know how many acres it is. I can't remember. But, we don't need more Site Cs. We need to be utilizing and upgrading the dams we have because they're there already, and ideally we don't need to use as much concrete in that process. But we also need to look at new renewables, and that's tidal. And there's a lot of excitement around tidal and wind. I mean, BC is a windy province, especially along the coast. We have the capacity to fuel a large chunk of our province with offshore wind farms and even in the interior up north, solar panels. I have family from Fort St. John and they were telling me, is it a deeply conservative area? Yes. But do they know a large chunk of their neighbors who are beginning to put solar panels on their houses? Absolutely. Because we get used to it down here on the coast where all three of us are from. It's rainy and dark all year, but that's not the case for the entire province. And I think really looking at how we can expand renewable projects in the areas in which it makes sense to put them is the future of BC. Bennett really splattered us with hydro, and it's worked for a long time, and it's kept our emissions low, and it's given us a really strong base of electrical generation that has been stable and uninterrupted. But moving forward, we can utilize our renewable energy sources to be more regional. And I think as well, the regionality of that will be better for different areas of the province. They will have more local control over their energy supplies, and it'll integrate better into the environment.
Emily, Site D, E, F. How far into the alphabet do you want to go?
Oh my God! Yeah, if the BC&DP has its way with electrifying LNG, we would need 8.4 Site C dams to make that happen. So it's truly fantastical thinking that net zero LNG is a solution. It was always a sham. It does literally nothing to reduce global emissions. It just saves the company more gas to sell on the other end. All the gas gets burned either way, but we are now paying for the electricity that we never get to use. So it's a terrible plan, and it's an issue of BC not counting global emissions, and this is how they've been changing the math on our climate plan and on our emissions, is just by exporting it and calling LNG climate friendly. Ultimately, this will push BC Hydro to the breaking point, and that could open up our most valuable publicly owned company to privatization and takeover. And so I think we need to scale the calls for power. We had the first call for power open up just over a year and a half ago, and there was another one more recently that prioritizes Indigenous ownership of clean power in the province, and allows them to sell back power to the BC Hydro grid. I have heard from many nations. I was at the Clean Energy BC conference with Indigenous nations last December, and I did hear from many that it was a fairly high barrier process, and it needs to be scaled. And it's largely focusing on utility scale projects. So I think we need a mix. We need to ensure that nations and communities across BC are building the renewable energy projects they want, ideally at a scale that matches the needs of the community. And I think, Adam, you're totally right that we need to move away from those larger scale projects because we know just how destructive they are. I think there's also really interesting models like a First Nations power authority that Cole Sayers and the Sayer family has been advocating for. And they were strongly opposed, and they were such a force in the fight against the Site C dam. And this would be a model where it would basically, it would allow nations to sell power back to the BC Hydro grid, but also between nations. So it would be an additional source of revenue and energy sovereignty across nations. So I think there's so many ways that we need to decolonize and challenge our BC Hydro grid and system, and ensure that nations are fully empowered and supported to meet their energy needs.
Jonathan, you want to wrap up the question? Site C.
Well, yes, to all of that. Need a mix. I'll be really quick because those answers were very detailed. We need a mix. My big thing too is really involving First Nations more in the renewable energy projects. I've called in my platform a minimum of 50% ownership of all major renewable by First Nations, and I think that's something that we should do. So again, I'll stop there, but if you go read my energy platform at jonathankerr4bc.com, I'd love your feedback. I'm as I'm going around the province meeting people, I'm also taking feedback on the platform and adjusting it and modifying it. It's a living platform, so really encourage your listeners to send me an email.
Can I just make a quick call out? If you're listening, David Eby, please name the dam. It's been a long time. The dam doesn't have a name yet. It's Site C from the original site plan from like the 1950s. A name would be nice.
So funny.
If we could get a name for it, that would be awesome.
Right.
But they just forgot to name the thing, I think.
We'll do a whole episode where we can spitball names for the dam. I think we have time maybe hopefully for one quick question, and let's try to keep it snappy because it could be a big one. I'm a big Simpsons fan, and I think there's an episode where Lisa says that the word for crisis and opportunity are the same in Chinese, I think.
Mandarin or Cantonese.
Mandarin or Cantonese. I think she says Chinese, but
yeah.
And Homer says, "Oh, crisitunity." So looking ahead at the future, maybe the next decade or so, we have a number of potential crises on the horizon, whether it's AI, climate, potential demographic collapse. What do you see as BC's opportunities, and how can we turn those problems into an opportunity? Anyone want to jump on that one?
Sure. Well, I think for me, really, I'm looking at the opportunity of that coalition of affordability, the environment, and the economy, and how those come together. How can we have solutions that improve the cost of living, reduce the cost of living for people so that it's, easier to afford groceries, easier to afford housing? How can we tackle housing and healthcare at the same time, make sure everyone has a family doctor, and also things that really improve our environmental protections? And those are the issues that really matter to voters, and that's the opportunity of our generation. That's also the opportunity for our party, and that's where I'm laser focused to make sure we elect more Green MLAs so that we hold the balance of power, so that we can enact those green policies in the legislature and provide that benefit for all British Columbians.
In a time when it feels like almost every political issue is becoming a crisis, we as a party have the opportunity to tell new stories about how we want to lead the province. And while now it feels like we have to, scramble and stress about the policies and the issues, we as a party come from a position where we already have the answers to these questions. And really, I think communicating that story to voters and to the people of this province that, we can make BC cheap to live in, we can make it a healthy and happy place for you to live, and a place where your family for the next 7 generations will be able to thrive, is the story people want to hear. And I think it's one of the reasons people are moving to Alberta is because they say it's cheap to live there. And working, I think the BC Greens need to tell the story of BC that people want to live in it again, because our province is beautiful, but it is getting hard for people to continue to live here. And that, I think, is an opportunity for us to share our policies, our platforms, our ideas on how we want our province to be and shaped. And in that, I think we need to take that and step forward. And I look forward to being able to do that, well, as if elected leader or continuing my involvement with the party.
Oh, Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead, Emily. Crisitunity.
Crisitunity. That's my thing. These are not normal times. We are living through a time of political monsters, rising fascism at our border, climate collapse, and a rising far right in this very province. We narrowly escaped a far right government in the last election. And I think the BC Greens are the solution to that. We know that throughout history, when we have a centrist government like the BC NDP, not meeting the needs of working people, the far right seizes that opportunity to scapegoat vulnerable groups. And that's what we saw in the last election. And that is what will continue to happen if the BC Greens don't step up with a bold wealth redistribution agenda that galvanizes people in this province. Across the rising crises of our time, I think distinctly people feel that the establishment parties are asleep at the wheel. And we can't cower and capitulate. We need to acknowledge the truth and the reality of our current existence. And we need strong stances in which we and a host of new Greens believe. So, I think the deepest truth of the crises of our time, of the climate crisis, is that we're all connected and that we no longer have the luxury of staying polite. So I'm building a political movement that will last longer than the leadership race, that will hold David Eby accountable and punch through with bright solutions so the Greens can be a formidable threat in the next election.
That's a wrap on our BC Green Leadership Special. Thanks to our guests, Jonathan Kerr, Emily Lowan, and Adam Bremner-Akins for joining us.
Akins, right?
Akins.
Yes.
And I want to mention that we didn't send the questions to these 3 candidates, and that putting your name out there and running for elections is both terrifying and exhilarating. And I want to really thank the 3 of you for making some time for our podcast today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Really, really appreciate it. And hey, anyone out there who's a BC Green member, voting in the leadership contest runs from September 13th through the 23rd, and there are details on bcgreens.ca around that. For those of you who are not BC Green members, hopefully you learned a little bit more about the party, and because it could be another Karga or something coming pretty soon. So
you can also find this and all of our past podcasts at nonpartisanhacks.com.
And we'd love to hear what you think. If you've got a topic idea, guest suggestion, or a government story, drop us a line. And Adam mentioned Premier Eby, and shout out to Premier Eby. Thanks again so much for you and your staff reaching out to us to be on the show. I want to encourage you, David, that you are in the queue. Until next time, take care of yourself and your community.
Thanks, everybody.